Hello everyone. So I've been working on this sort of forest terrain tabletop. What I had in mind originally was that I bought some figures from Sally Forth, I believe it was, Legends of Sherwood, so Robin Hood and Sheriff of Nottingham and all that, and wanted to have a table, sort of suitable to play like sort of Sherwood Forest type of table. But then, of course, you come across an awful lot of difficulties. So that's really what I wanted to talk to you about in this video: is how do you war game on a sort of densely packed table like a forest? I mean, the answer really is that you can't practically do it. You have to make a lot of compromises, especially when it comes to forest terrain. You've got the problem of if you model it too realistically, you have a very kind of uneven table surface to begin with. If you pack the terrain pieces too closely together, you end up not being able to position your units on the table. The scenery just gets in the way and blocks you placing the units down on the table. And then, in particular with forests, you've got the added problem that if you have too much of a tree canopy, you have that added problem of not being able to see your figures on the tabletop and reach the figures and move the figures because the foliage is just too dense for you to be able to get to it. So I mean, this of course is why you don't get many battles historically taking place in forests. It was just impossible for armies to deploy in formations and so on. So wargaming forest battles isn't going to be a particularly high on people's agenda anyway. I mean, I can think of a few examples like the sort of Teutoburg forest and the North American forests during the French Indian Wars and so on. But just as in real life, in wargaming, you're going to trickle down to the sort of skirmish level games. You're not going to have mass battles taking place in forests. So this is why, in particular, Sherwood Forest, and I know it's not historically, true to life, but something like battling out Robin Hood and his merry men in Sherwood Forest is more of a sort of skirmish level type of game. So that's what I'm kind of aiming to do with this table. So let me just talk you through some of my ideas. First thing is that the actual table mat itself, let me just zoom in a little bit now so you can see what I'm talking about a bit better. So this is a mat from Deep Cut Studios, and it's actually their forest mat. And as you can see, the sort of design of the mat is to represent ferns and roots and a sort of foresty kind of floor. So that sets that gives you the setting really for the game on its own. Depending on the rules you're playing, you could say, that if you are attempting to play something like a set of rules like Black Powder or something, you could say that the entire table is a forest. So you're not just using templates to represent woods and forests on the tabletop. The entire tabletop is a forest. So any rules, that apply to, formations have to be unformed, or cavalry operate in different ways, that kind of thing. You could apply it to the entire game and the entire tabletop. After that, what I've done, let me point you at one of these 3D printed trees here. So I printed out a lot of trees from, who was it from? Printable Scenery. I believe they're based in New Zealand. And these were all part of their Country and King Kickstarter that I pledged into, and printed off a lot of the trees. You just get the armature, and then you have to glue the foliage on and so on. So my idea with the trees is to just have them on the tabletop to represent the fact that it's a forest, but not to worry too much about the positioning. So if you're moving units around on the table and so on, you can just move these out of the way. They're just there to give more of a kind of an appearance of a forest. But then we go on to other items such as that tree trunk there. Now you can see with that, it's just the lower half of a tree. The top has been, the top isn't represented. So you haven't got any of the, as I was saying earlier, any of the branches or the foliage or the tree canopy getting in your way. This is more to be looked at from a kind of tabletop level rather than down on it, as we're looking at the moment. So this kind of scenery, you don't move. It's there to block line of sight. Line of sight is going to be reduced on this tabletop anyway, depending on the rules you're playing. Because of the being in a forest setting, you're going to have reduced ranges and reduced line of sight anyway. But these items here, again 3D printed, are there not to be moved, and they will affect line of sight and cover and so on. There's a fallen log there, for instance. So they're not to be moved. And these all, incidentally, I got all of these from 3D printed again on my own 3D printer. But I got those from a Kickstarter from a chap called Lincoln Savvy, I believe his name was. There's another one there. And what he did was he used the photogrammetry technique to actually get 3D representations of real trees in his neighbourhood. So these trees are all Canadian. They're not necessarily in particularly wooded areas. I mean, he's very usefully on his Kickstarter page gave photographs of the real trees and so on. I really like them because they are genuine trees. They're full of woodpecker holes and knots, and they look really good, I think. See if I can get. There's a really nice one there, which is a tree that's been partially uprooted, and so on. They're full of character, but they're only the lower sections of the trees. So they are there really to act as obstacles, to block line of sight, to be able to take cover behind them and so on. So they will come into the game. And then the third type of scenery that I put on the table, and again these don't get moved are lots of sort of templates of areas with vegetation on them. So for these, I've just obtained a lot of cheap Chinese foliage. These were meant to be ferns, so I've got a lot of fern, areas of fern on the table, and again, they're going to act to block line of sight, but in order to be able to give cover to figures or even units that are within them. So they're going to come into play in the game as well, and not be movable. Let's just see if I can zoom in on another. There's another group of ferns there. And I was quite pleased with those. Originally they were, that sort of fairly lurid green plastic colour, but I think I've managed to paint them up quite successfully to look a little bit more realistic. Also, I've got a couple of others, slightly different areas. Just there, I've got a little marshy, boggy area with a little bit of water on it. That's going to represent a sort of little marsh or a bog in the middle of the forest, a source of drinking water for animals and so on. And I also painted up, I had some spare few ferns left over at the end, so I painted up a Celtic cross that I originally got from magnetic displays. I think they're called Coritani. Trevor Holland. It goes under a number of names, but you can find that in the magnetic displays Coritani website. And I had a few of those that I bought a long time ago as objective markers for the game of Saga, and never got around to painting them. So I thought one of those would look good. It adds it's sort of another topic that I hadn't sort of mentioned before is that woods are often the setting for fantasy games, and it kind of gives you that fantasy element. I mean, glades in woods and so on were often places of worship and so on for, druids or whatever. And once the country began to be Christianized, very often you would find crosses put up in areas that had previously been shrines for pagan gods and so on. So it kind of, gives it a slight sort of fantasy feel, I suppose, but it gives it a period feel as well. Nice. It's a nice sort of addition for a game set in Sherwood Forest possibly, and it could be an objective marker in a game or a waypoint or something like that. That's another reason the cross might be there, to mark the line of a path through the wood, to get you through the difficulties of crossing the wood, navigating your way across and so on. So there we are. That's my take on a forest terrain table. I'm quite pleased with the way it turned out. It's not exactly how I intended it to look. It's this compromise you have to make between representing a forest that's quite dense, but at the same time having enough room on the table to place your figures and have a playable game without the scenery actually getting in the way too much. But yeah, quite pleased with that. Okay, thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.